The helmet hit the tarmac and cracked like a rifle shot. It was a $400 carbon fiber demo helmet, and it split along the crown. When it struck the concrete, the sound of it went out, across the static display line. It bounced off the aluminum skins of 40 parked aircraft and came back. And after that, there was nothing. No PA, no engines, 8,000 people on a flight line. In October. And for about 3 seconds, you could have heard a coin roll. The young man who had dropped it did not bend to pick it up. He had gone the particular gray that men go when their body understands a thing, a half second, before their mind agrees to it. He was looking past me, over my shoulder, at the old soldier who had stopped walking 30 feet away, with one foot still in the air. The old soldier was a major general, 2 black stars on a long coat, a pale blue ribbon at his throat that almost nobody in this country gets to wear, an aide frozen at his elbow, with a folder full of a schedule. That was not going to happen now. He had been crossing the apron to cut a ribbon. He had stopped in the middle of a step, the way you stop when the floor turns out not to be where you left it. He brought his foot down. He came to attention, and in front of 8,000 spectators, and a press riser, and a brand director with a clipboard, a Medal of Honor recipient, raised his right hand to a 60-year-old woman in a thrift store canvas coat and held the salute. I want to be honest about what I felt, because it was not triumph. It was the old cold thing I have felt my whole life. When a room turns to look at me, I have spent 40 years being looked at by people who decided in 3 seconds what I was, and being right, exactly never. I did not feel avenged. I felt the wind come down the flight line and move over the rotor blades of the aircraft behind me. My aircraft? The one I had been told 90 seconds earlier to step back from. And I thought, the way I have always thought, the air does not care what any of you decided about me before I tell you why a man who had earned the highest award this country gives was standing at attention. In front of a woman everyone there had written off as somebody's lost grandmother hit that subscribe button. Because what the brand director did next, when she finally understood whose name was painted on the nose of that aircraft, is the part nobody on that flight line saw coming. And I am going to tell you all of it. But to explain why that general stopped mid-step, I have to take you back to 7 o'clock that morning, before the gates opened, when I came down the line alone, to stand with my airplane, one last time. My name is Marion Voss. People call me Marnie. I was 59 years old that October, and I had driven 4 hours the night before, in a 14-year-old Subaru, to be at the gates of a regional air museum when they opened, because I wanted to be alone with the airplane before the crowds got to it, and I am not a person who says that kind of thing out loud. I live in a small house, on a county road, outside a town you have not heard of. I keep chickens, badly. I have a garden that the deer win every August. My truck is older than most of the men who would be flying the demos that day, when the foundation that restored the aircraft first wrote to me. 11 months earlier, the letter sat on my kitchen table for 2 weeks before I could make myself open it. And another month before I answered, and I almost did not go at all. I dress like what people expect a woman my age to be, and I do it on purpose. That morning I wore a canvas barn coat, the color of a paper bag, the same coat I have worn to 100 of these things, with a collar gone soft from washing, and a pocket I have torn and sewn twice. I could have worn other things. I have a closet with other things in it, dark and pressed, and heavy with ribbon, and I keep the door of that closet shut. I wanted to walk that flight line, the way anybody's mother walks it. I wanted to be a person, before I was a tail number. People decide what you are. In the first 3 seconds. Off your coat, and your hands, and the way you carry your spine. I stopped correcting them a long time ago. I let them believe it. There is a kind of freedom in being underestimated that costs you everything and pays you back in quiet. And I had made my peace with the trade. My hands are the part that tells the truth, if anyone bothers to read them. 3,400 hours of gripping a cyclic and a collective leave a mark. My right hand does not fully close. Before about 10 in the morning, the cold has to come out of the knuckles first. My neck will not turn all the way to the left anymore. There is a hard stop, about 2/3 of the way around. A souvenir from a night I put a damaged aircraft onto a desert strip, harder than the manual recommends. When I reach for something high, I lead with my whole body, the way you turn a boat instead of your head. None of it shows if I am careful, and I am always careful. In my right coat pocket, where I have kept it for 30 years, there is a stub of grease pencil, China marker, the old kind, the wax kind we used to write fuel numbers and frequencies, and the names of dead men on the inside of a canopy. I do not use it for anything now. I roll it between my thumb and 2 fingers. When I have to stand still and be calm, the way some people work a coin, or a worry stone. 30 years out of a cockpit, and I still cannot keep that hand quiet without it. The ceiling was low that morning. I noticed it the way you never stop noticing it. Once a sky has tried to kill you. A flat gray lid, maybe 1,000 feet up. Mist still lying in the seams of the runway. The kind of overcast that has to burn off before anything good can happen. I have a whole life's worth of feelings about a low ceiling, and I will get to those. I came down the static line at 7, with the grease pencil turning in my pocket, and the dew still gray on the concrete, and I stood in front of the airplane, and I will tell you in a minute what it was. But first, I have to tell you that it knew me, before I knew it. That is the only way I can say it. I came around the tail and saw the nose, and something in my chest did a thing it had not done in a very long time. There was a name painted there in flat black, and a small bird beside it, and I had to put my torn pocket hand flat on the cold aluminum of the engine cowling and breathe before I could read my own life back to myself. The aircraft was an AH-64 Apache. Specifically, it was the 620 ship. I knew it by the last 3 of the tail number, before I was close enough to read the tail number. The way you know a voice on a phone, before the person says who it is. I had flown that exact airframe in combat. The Foundation had found it in a boneyard, bought it for scrap money, and spent 3 years, and $250,000, putting it back the way it had been, on the worst and best night of my professional life. Down to the nose art, down to the crow. My call sign was Morrigan. You get a call sign, you do not choose it. Mine came from a colonel, with a literature degree and a mean streak, he decided. After I flew a check ride in weather that grounded everyone else, that I was named for the Irish war goddess, who appears over a battlefield as a crow, and decides who lives and who falls. He meant it as a joke about my temperament. It stuck because of what happened later. And what happened later is the reason that General stopped mid-step on the apron. I was a lieutenant colonel by then, commanding an attack reconnaissance squadron, which mostly means I should have been flying a desk, but I flew, because I was good, and because I would not ask a 24-year-old to go into weather I would not go into myself. There was a valley. I will not give you its name. The men who fought in it know which one I mean, and the rest of you do not need it. It was about 2 rotor discs wide at the bottom, with walls that came up sheer on both sides. And it ate aircraft. Going in there low at night was a thing we talked about, the way you talk about a hard surgery. Possible. Occasionally necessary. Frequently fatal. A company of infantry got pinned in that valley one night, in the back half of a deployment. 19 men, in a draw, taking fire from above on 3 sides. Weather coming down on top of all of it. The ceiling was 400 feet. You are not supposed to fly an Apache in a place like that, with a ceiling like that. The book says you do not. The book is written by people who have never listened to 19 voices on a radio, doing math about whether they will see morning. Their commander was a captain named Hartigan. I had never met him. I never saw his face. To me, he was a voice, getting flatter and slower as the night went on, which is what a good officer's voice does exactly, when his situation is getting worse, because he is spending everything he has on staying calm. So his men can hear that he is calm. He called my call sign on the radio, the way you would call a name in the dark. Morrigan. This is Hard Rock 6. And I went in. I made 6 passes, 9 gun runs. All told, down a corridor I could not see the sides of, flying off instruments and the muzzle flashes, and a picture in my head of terrain. I had memorized that afternoon because some animal part of me had known. My front seater, my co-pilot gunner that night, a kid we called Dobie, did the shooting. I did the flying, which in that valley was the hard part. Each pass we came down into it, and the walls were close enough that the rotor wash came back off the rock and shoved us. And we took fire. And we put fire exactly where Hartigan's voice told us his men were not. And we pulled out. And came around. And did it again. Here is the number I never let myself say for 16 years. We stayed 11 minutes past bingo fuel. Bingo is the number that means go home now, or you will not get home. I looked at 14 minutes of fuel, and I stayed for 11 of them, which left 3, which is not enough, which is the kind of decision they court-martial you for, if it goes wrong, and pin things on you, if it goes right. It went right. We broke off, with the gauge against the peg, and made a base I had no business making, dead stick close, the engines coughing on fumes. As we sat down, 19 men walked out of that valley. All 19. Captain Hartigan carried 2 of them himself, across the last open ground after his platoon sergeant went down. And that, plus what he did before it, is why a year and a half later, a president put a pale blue ribbon around his neck, in a room full of cameras. In every interview he ever gave, he said the same thing. He said the air cover was the reason any of them were alive to be saved, and that he never knew who the pilot was, only the call sign, and that he had been trying to find Morrigan for years to shake that person's hand. He had been looking for me. He just thought, like everyone always thinks, that he was looking for a man. I never corrected that assumption either. The Army gave me a Distinguished Flying Cross with a V for valor, and I put it in the closet with the door shut. There is a thing that happens to women who do jobs people have decided are men's jobs, where the better you are, the more the story rearranges itself around you, so that the part you did becomes the part the airframe did, or the system did, or some man nearby did. I got tired of fighting the rearranging. After enough years, the attention itself becomes the thing you are most tired of. I let them keep their picture of a man named Morrigan. The men in the valley were alive. That was the part that counted. And I told myself the rest of it was vanity. So that is who was standing at the rope line in a paper bag coat. Not that anyone there could have known. That is the whole engine of what happened that day. The distance between what I had done and what I looked like. And the certainty of the people who never thought to wonder if those 2 things might not match. I want to tell you one more thing before the gates open, because it is the thing underneath all of it, and because it explains why I had let the closet door stay shut for so long. After the war, I went to Fort Rucker and I taught. For 6 years, I made new pilots out of kids. I was, I am told, very good at it, in the way that is its own kind of cruelty. Because the better you are at the safe job, the easier it is for everyone to keep you in it. And the easier it is for you to keep yourself there too. I trained more than 200 student aviators. 211 of them are out there right now flying, or teaching, or raising kids on the strength of things I taught them. and I have never once let myself count them. I count the one. Her name was Ava Calloway. We called her Birdie because she was small and fierce, and never stopped talking on the ground, and went completely silent and perfect in the air. She had hands like I had at her age. She was the best stick I ever taught, and I told her so exactly once, which I will regret until I die. There was a night training event, weather coming in, and I flagged it. I wrote it up. I said the conditions were below what these students should be in, and I recommended we scrub. I was overruled by a man 2 grades above me, who had a syllabus to keep, and a calendar that did not care about a ceiling. Birdie's aircraft went into a ridge and cloud at 0200, and there was nothing left to bring home. I had flown a valley that ate aircraft, and brought out 19 men I never met. I could not bring out one girl I loved. From a training area I knew like my own kitchen, because the decision was not mine to make, and I made the recommendation, and the recommendation lost. And somewhere in the months after, I did the cruelest arithmetic a person can do. I decided the 19 did not count. I decided the 211 did not count. I decided that the only number that was really mine was the 1. I put in my retirement papers. I shut the closet door, and I went to a county road to keep chickens badly and let the deer win. And I told myself I was at peace. And for 6 years, almost nobody knew the difference, including me. The gates opened at 8. By 9, the flight line was filling up, and at about 9:45, a young man in a flight suit, with a sponsor's logos all over it, walked up to the rope in front of my airplane and decided, in 3 seconds, exactly what I was. His name was Brett Donnelly. I learned it later off a banner. He was the headline demo pilot for the weekend, a civilian aerobatic performer who flew a sleek little single-engine thing, painted like a hornet. And he had the particular shine of a man who has been told he is special by people who needed something from him. He came down the line trailing 2 sponsors and a phone on a stick, doing the thing where you narrate your own life. For an audience that has not asked, I was standing inside the rope. I want to be precise about that, because it matters later. I was standing inside the rope line, next to the aircraft, where a foundation volunteer in a polo shirt had walked me an hour before and said, "You're with us, ma'am. You go ahead." Because the foundation knew exactly who I was, even if no one with a microphone did. I had my hand flat on the cowling. I was looking at the crow. The crow was wrong. I should tell you that. The restorers had done a museum-grade job. Photographs and color matching. And a steady hand. And they had reproduced the Morrigan's crow on the nose, down to the last feather, except they had made it perfect. And the original had not been perfect. The original crow had a short toe. A 19-year-old armament kid named Sweeney had repainted the nose art one night out of boredom and clipped one of the toes too short. And I had told him to leave it, because by then, the ship had brought people home with that crow on it, and I was not going to let anybody fix what had been lucky. For 16 years. That crow had a stubby toe. The restored one had all of them. Neat and whole. And it was the most beautiful thing. And it was not quite my airplane. And I was standing there, with my thumb on the grease pencil in my pocket, thinking about a toe. That is when Donnelly arrived at the rope. "Whoa, whoa. Ma'am," he said it loud, for the phone, with a smile that was all teeth. "I'm gonna need you to step back behind the line for me, okay? This is a real warbird, not a petting zoo." I looked at him. I did not say anything. I have a face I built over 40 years for exactly this, a face that gives a person nothing to push against. And I gave it to him. And it did what it always does, which is make a certain kind of man work harder. "It's a complicated machine," he said. "Slower, the way you talk to someone you have decided is simple." He patted the air toward me. "Back, back. Lot of history here. Cockpit's not for tourists, all right? You probably can't even tell which end is the front. He grinned at the phone. One of the sponsors laughed. A few people at the rope laughed, not all of them. There you go. Mind the rope on your way around. There's a nice cafe back by the gate. While he was talking, my eyes had already done the thing they do on a flight line. Without asking my permission, I had seen that the left main chock was kicked half out of true, and that whoever buttoned the rotor down the night before had finished it with a lazy half-hitch, instead of the knot the manual wants. And some 30-year-old part of me, I wanted to walk over and fix both of them. More than I wanted to breathe. He was performing the airplane for a phone on a stick. I was reading it. That is the whole difference between a loud man and a steady one. And it was standing right there in the open. For anyone who knew how to look. And not one person at that rope did. I will tell you exactly what I did, because the truth is the only thing in this story worth anything. I took my hand off the cowling. I stepped back over the rope. Slow, planting each foot. Because at 59, you read a flight line for the cable runs and the chalk edges, the way you used to read terrain. I felt the 11 minutes past bingo thing try to come up in me. The old, cold competence that does not feel like anger, because it is the opposite of anger. It is the thing that floods in. When anger would get someone killed, my thumb pressed the grease pencil, so hard the wax gave a little. Training took over. Not pride. Not the urge to say a single word. Training. The same thing that put the aircraft on instruments. In a valley I could not see. The thing that does the right next small action. While the rest of you stands very still. The right next small action was nothing. So I did nothing. I stepped back, and I let him have his moment, and I filed his face. The way I have always filed the faces of men who are certain. And a young woman in a foundation polo, the volunteer who had walked me in, went very still about 10 feet away, the way decent young people go still, when they watch an older person be treated badly, and have not yet learned how to make it funny. She started toward us. I gave her the smallest shake of my head. Not yet. Stand fast. She flushed and stopped. And I filed her face too, in the other drawer. The drawer where I keep the ones worth keeping. It was 9:45. The dedication was at 10:30. I made a quiet, deliberate decision. Standing on the wrong side of my own rope, I decided I would stay for it. I had almost left. I want you to know that I had almost gotten in the Subaru and driven 4 hours home, rather than make a scene. Instead, I decided to stay exactly where I was and see the thing through. Because somewhere under the paper bag coat, a 40-year-old voice said, very quietly, "That is your airplane, and you do not run from your airplane." I walked back toward the gate, past the cafe Donnelly had recommended, and I found a payphone of the human kind, which is to say, I found the Foundation's tent, and I asked the woman at the table if I could use the landline, because my cell does not work out there. And I made one call. I called Sweeney. Not the 19-year-old anymore, a 60-year-old roofer in Ohio now. The armament kid who painted the crow. The only other living person. Who knew about the toe. We had stayed in loose touch the way you do. A card at Christmas. A call when somebody from the old unit dies. I called him because I needed to hear one voice that knew. Before I walked back into a crowd that did not. Sweeney. I said, I'm standing in front of the 620 ship. There was a long quiet on the line. The kind that has a whole night folded up inside it. Then he said, they found her. Not a question. They found her. Restored her right down to your crow. They fixed your toe. Sweeney. Made it perfect. I heard him laugh. And then I heard the laugh go somewhere else. Don't you let them keep it perfect, he said. That toe brought 19 boys home. You put it back, Colonel. I told him I would. I told him a young man had just told me. The cockpit wasn't for tourists. Sweeney was quiet again. And then he said the thing I needed somebody to say, in the flat, hard voice of a man. who had loaded the rockets onto that aircraft with his own hands. He doesn't know who you are. No, I said. He doesn't. You gonna tell him? No, I said. I'm not going to tell anybody anything. I'm going to go stand by my airplane and let the morning happen. That was the whole of my preparation. I did not put on the dark coat from the closet. It was 4 hours away, in a closet on a county road. And that is exactly where I had wanted it. I did not call a general. I did not call the press. I did not call anyone with a star or a gavel. I made one phone call to a roofer in Ohio about the toe of a crow. And then I walked back down the line, and I took up a position about 40 feet from my airplane, behind the rope, in the crowd, in my paper bag coat, and I waited. Waiting is a skill, like instrument flight, or marking a canopy. It is the one I am best at. I have been underestimated in 100 rooms, and the waiting is the only weapon I have ever needed, because the truth is patient, and it does not require my help. I rolled the grease pencil in my pocket, and I watched them set up the ribbon, and the little podium, and the press riser. And I watched Sloane Mercer move through it all with a clipboard. And I did not yet know her name, but I knew her type, and I watched her do a thing that, when I understood it later, was the worst part of the whole day. I will come back to it. The crowd thickened. 10:30 came. A black sedan rolled up to the apron, and a man got out in a long coat, with 2 stars on it, and a pale blue ribbon at his throat. And the part of the morning I had been waiting for, without knowing I was waiting for it, began to move. Major General Wesley Hartigan had a knee that did not work right, and a back that had been carrying men for 40 years. And he came across the apron, slower than his aide wanted him to, shaking hands, being the thing a Medal of Honor recipient has to be at events like this, which is patient and gracious, and on display. He was the co-guest of honor. He was there to cut the ribbon on the restored aircraft and say a few words about the night in the valley, the night he never stopped talking about, the night a call sign he had never been able to put a face to had come down into the dark for his men. Sloane Mercer met him at the front. I could see her clipboard. I could see, even from 40 feet, the way she steered. And here is the thing I had watched her do 20 minutes earlier and not understood. She had been at the podium with the program, and she had crossed something out, and she had written something in, and she had pulled Brett Donnelly aside and put her hand on his arm and pointed at the airplane and at the press riser. And Donnelly had nodded and shined. She had rewritten the unveiling. The program, I saw it later. I have it. It is in a drawer in my house on the county road, said that the aircraft would be unveiled by the original combat pilot. Guest of honor. In attendance. That was me. The Foundation had flown me there, in their own quiet way, to pull the cover off my own airplane, and Sloane Mercer had spent the morning deciding that the guest of honor, whoever this Morrigan was, had not materialized in a form she could photograph, and that the marketable thing, the thing for the sponsors and the riser and the brand, was to have the handsome young Hornet pilot do the unveiling and tell the Valley story secondhand, with the old soldier beside him for gravity. She had not failed to recognize me. She had decided I could not possibly be me. That is the colder thing, and it is the true thing, and it is why what happened next was not an accident the universe arranged. It was a debt the universe collected. General Hartigan stepped up onto the little platform. The PA crackled to life. Sloane Mercer leaned into the microphone and welcomed everyone, and thanked the sponsors, and gestured at the aircraft. And she said that they were so honored today to unveil this magnificent warbird, and that the man who would do the honors, alongside General Hartigan, was their own headline performer. A pilot in the finest tradition, and Brett Donnelly stepped up onto the platform beside the general, with both hands raised to the crowd. He leaned toward the general's microphone, grinning, and he said, loud, for the riser and the phones, "What an honor to fly in the footsteps of a real warrior. Like the man who flew this bird. I just hope I can do half of what he did up there. The man. He did not know. None of them knew. He was reaching for the cord on the cover with one hand and waving with the other. And General Hartigan, who had been looking out at the crowd with the patient face, was not looking at Donnelly. He was looking at the nose of the aircraft. He had stopped. His eyes were on the black name and the crow, and then they came off the airplane and went out into the crowd. Slow, searching, the way you search a chart for a mark you remember. And they crossed 40 feet of spectators. And they found me, a woman in a paper bag coat, with her hand back in her pocket, and her face giving nothing. I watched a man, who had carried 2 soldiers across open ground under fire, go absolutely still. I watched the color leave him. He had spent 16 years looking for Morrigan, and some part of him, looking at the crow, and then at the only person on that flight line, who was looking back at him with the flat calm of someone who had been in a valley, knew, before he could have known. His mouth moved. No sound came out the first time. Then it did, and the microphone was right there, and it carried. Morrigan. One word. It went out across 8,000 people on the PA, and it meant nothing to almost all of them, and it meant everything to the 4 or 5 old aviators, scattered in that crowd, who came up out of their folding chairs, like they had been called. One, and then another, and then another. The way it happens, the way the truth confirms itself. When one person says it out loud. Brett Donnelly's hand came off the cover cord. He turned to look where the general was looking. He still did not understand. He looked at me, and he looked back at the general. And he started to say something. And his other hand, the waving hand, opened. And his $400 carbon fiber demo helmet, which he had been holding by the strap the whole time for the cameras, slipped out of his fingers. It hit the tarmac and cracked like a rifle shot. And then there was nothing. No PA, no engines, 8,000 people on a flight line, and the only sound in all of it was the loose corner of a vinyl sponsor banner, snapping in the wind down at the end of the line. A slow, flat snap. 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 Patient as a heartbeat, the way the wind keeps its own time, and does not care what any of us has just learned. General Hartigan came off the platform. His aide reached for his elbow, and he shook it off. He crossed the apron to the rope line, in front of 40 cameras, with his bad knee and his bad back, and the crowd peeled open in front of him. Somewhere along the line, a Foundation volunteer in a polo shirt, the same young woman, I think, unclipped the rope and let it drop. And nobody told her to, and nobody put it back. The ceiling had burned off by then. The gray lid was gone, and the sun was full on the flight line, and the general stopped where the rope had been a second before. Close enough that I could see the place, where the years had folded his face, and I could see that his eyes were wet, and his jaw was working, and he was not going to be able to make a speech, and he did not try. He came to attention, and he saluted me. I did not salute back right away. I am a colonel. He is a general. The protocol is upside down, and we both knew it. And he did not care. And neither, in that second. Did I? I took my hand out of my pocket. I left the grease pencil where it was. I brought my right hand up. The one that does not fully close before 10 in the morning. And it closed enough. And I returned the salute of a man I had kept out of the dark 16 years before, and had never once seen until that moment. Sir, I said, then, because it was the only thing I had it in me to say, and because 8,000 people deserved exactly 8 words, and not one more. You found her. Sorry it took so long. That was all. I did not explain myself. I have never explained myself, and I was not going to start on a flight line. In front of the man who had asked me to step back from my own airplane, and the woman who had decided I could not be who I was. The crow did the explaining. The general did the explaining. I just stood there, and let the truth do what truth does. When it finally gets loose in a crowd, Brett Donnelly did not come for me. He had the sense, in the end, not to. He stood on that platform, while the cover came off the aircraft an hour later pulled by me, the way the program had said all along, with General Hartigan's hand over mine on the cord. And he watched 8,000 people, who had heard him say the cockpit's not for tourists, learn exactly what kind of cockpit it was, and exactly who it had belonged to. He did not lose a career. He did not have the kind you can lose that way. He lost the weekend. The sponsor's logos came off his airplane by the next season. I am told 2 of the 3 did not renew, and the clip of the helmet hitting the tarmac has been watched a number of times. I will not dignify. And a man whose whole act was, I fly in the footsteps of warriors, learned that there are footsteps you do not get to claim. He flew his demo that afternoon as scheduled. The crowd was polite. That was its own kind of sentence. And I did not have to lift a finger to pass it. Sloane Mercer came for me. Of course she did. The architect always comes, because the architect believes there is a deal to be made. She found me by the aircraft in the late afternoon, after the crowds had thinned, when I was standing with my hand on the cowling again, and General Hartigan had gone to sit down because his knee was finished for the day. She had lost the clipboard. She had a face arranged into something between an apology and a negotiation. Colonel Voss, she said it carefully, trying the name on, like it might bite. We owe you an enormous apology. There was a miscommunication this morning, a real breakdown in our process, and I would never have if I had known. You knew the guest of honor was the original pilot, I said. It was on the program. You crossed it out. The apology fell off her face. The negotiation stayed. I made a branding call, she said, and to her credit she said it straight, which I almost respected. I was wrong about it. Look, this could be a wonderful story for the Foundation. For both of us. We'd love to make you the face of the restoration. Do it properly. Press. A real ceremony. The way you deserved this morning. I think we can put this behind. No, I said. She waited for the rest of it. There was no rest of it. That is the thing people like Sloane Mercer never expect. The full stop. I was not going to be the face of anything. I had spent 40 years declining to be a face. You looked at me this morning, I said, and you decided what I was. And you rewrote the program to match. You weren't the first. You won't be the last. I'm not angry about it. And I wasn't. The anger had burned off at the rope line like fog, the way it always does. And what was left was just the plain gray fact of a person who told the truth about herself out loud, in front of the wrong woman. But I'm not going to fix it for you. You don't get the story. You get to know that the woman you sent to the cafe flew that airplane down a valley nobody else would fly, and that you spent the morning trying to keep her away from it. You get to carry that. I'd carry it carefully, if I were you. She did not have an answer to that, because there was not one, and we both knew it. She stood a moment longer, and then she went. The way the architects always go. Fast. Looking for the next thing to manage. The young volunteer in the Foundation polo found me as the light was going gold. She was 22. She wanted to apologize for not standing up to Donnelly at the rope. And I told her the same thing I have told myself for 40 years, and finally half believed that day. You don't owe anyone proof of what you saw, I said. You knew it was wrong while it was happening. That's the whole job. You'll be tempted, your whole life, to laugh along because a louder person told you it was safe to. Don't. You're going to look at a person before you decide what they are. Start now, she cried a little, which I let her do. And she will be a better officer, or a better whatever she becomes, than the man who told me the cockpit wasn't for tourists. And that, in the end, is the only thing the whole day was for. General Hartigan and I sat in 2 folding chairs, in the long light after almost everyone had gone, and he told me about the valley from the ground, which I had never heard. And I told him about the valley from the air, which he had never heard. Between the 2 of us, we finally had the whole night, both halves of it. 16 years late, He told me he had a granddaughter named for the call sign Morgan. Close enough. A thing his daughter had done, before anyone knew Morgan was a woman. And now it was a thing that meant more than he could say. He told me the 19 had a group chat. He told me they met up every few years. And that there was always an empty chair they set for the pilot they could never find. And he asked me, with his hat in his hands like a much younger man, if I would come sit in it. And here is the part I have to tell you straight, because the whole story is worthless if I don't. He asked me, the way a man asks a thing he has wondered about for 16 years, how many times did you go down into it? And I said, 6 passes. 9 runs. 11 minutes past bingo. And he was quiet. And then he said the thing that took the closet door off its hinges. You went into a place that ate aircraft 6 times. In weather. For 19 men you'd never met. He said. And then you spent the rest of your life thinking you were the woman who lost one girl in a training area. He was not asking. He had read it on me. The way I read a flight line. That's not what you are. Colonel. I should know. I'm one of the ones you carried out. And I've been looking for you for 16 years. To tell you the carrying counted. I did not answer him for a while. The wind had dropped. The banner had stopped snapping. Somewhere a generator hummed, and a cooling engine ticked. And I sat in a folding chair, next to a man I had kept alive without ever seeing his face. And for the first time in 6 years, I let myself do the other arithmetic. 19. 211. The carrying counted. It did not bring Birdie back. Nothing was ever going to bring Birdie back. And a humiliated demo pilot and a general's salute did not balance that ledger and were never going to. Because that ledger does not balance. It just gets carried by 2 hands instead of 1, which is the only mercy on offer. But the 19 counted. The 211 counted. I had been letting the one erase the rest for 6 years. Alone. In a dark room of my own building. And a man I saved had just turned the light on. The chair, I said finally. I'll come sit in it. He nodded once. The way you nod when a thing you have wanted for 16 years finally lands, and did not make it bigger than it was. And I told him the part I had never told anyone, because the long light and the folding chairs, and the man I had carried out made it possible. I told him I had been keeping an empty chair of my own for 6 years. A girl named Birdie, the best stick I ever taught. I told him I was going to bring her name to his reunion, that the 19 could set 2 chairs now. One for the pilot they finally found, and one for the pilot I couldn't keep, and that this was the only way I knew, to make the carrying count out loud, instead of in the dark. He said the 19 would be honored. He said soldiers know exactly what an empty chair is for. We sat with that a while, 2 people who had each been carrying the same kind of weight alone, and we set part of it down between us in the grass, and some of it went where it belonged. Before I left, I did the thing I had told Sweeney I would do. I walked up to the nose of the airplane in the last of the light, and I took the grease pencil out of my pocket, the stub I have carried for 30 years, the China marker we used to write the names of dead men inside a canopy, and I uncapped it, and I reached up to the restored crow, with its 4 perfect toes, and I shortened one, just clipped it back, the way Sweeney's had been. A small black correction on a museum-grade restoration, the imperfection that had brought 19 men home. I made the airplane mine again. Then I capped the pencil and put it back in my pocket. And I put my hand flat on the cowling one more time, the way you put your hand on the shoulder of someone who carried you. And I said goodnight to it. And I drove 4 hours home in a 14-year-old Subaru, to feed chickens in the dark. The crow on the 620 ship has a short toe again. The Foundation left it. I am told the placard now mentions it. I want to say something to you now, whoever you are. However, a stranger's certainty has decided what you are. They will look at your coat, and your hands, and the gray in your hair, and they will tell you to step back behind the rope. They will tell you the cockpit's not for tourists. They will be sure. The way only people who have never had to prove they belong are ever sure. And some of them will even be kind about it. and the kind ones are the hardest to bear. And you will be tempted, the way I was tempted for 40 years, to let the one thing you lost erase every single thing you carried home. Don't. The carrying counts. It counts even when nobody knows your name. It counted on the slow walk down the line in the paper bag coat, before a single person turned to look. The salute did not make you real. You were real in the valley, in the dark, with the gauge against the peg. You were real the whole time. Here is the thing about the rope. They will always have one. And they will always tell you to stand behind it. And you will spend years believing you are on the wrong side of it. You are not. You were on the side with the airplane the whole time. They just could not see which side you were standing on. And one day, if you are lucky, someone unclips it and lets it drop, and nobody puts it back. And you find out it was never holding you out at all. It was only ever holding their idea of you in place. The Morrigan was never the goddess of killing. People think that, the way they think a great many things off the surface of a word. She was the one who flew over the dying and decided who got to go home. She was the last thing between good men and the dark. I spent 40 years thinking my call sign meant death, and let it keep me small, and let it keep me quiet, and let it keep one closed closet door between me and my own life. It never meant death. It meant I was the one who went into the dark, so that other people came back out of it, and that the ones I carried out counted. Every one of them. Exactly as much as the one I couldn't. That is what the name meant. It just took a cracked helmet, and an old soldier's salute, and a short toe on a crow, for me to finally read it right. If this story meant something to you, I hope you'll share it with someone who may need this reminder today, someone who has been letting other people's certainty tell them where they belong. Tell them the carrying counts. Tell them to plant their foot and stay by their airplane. It was always theirs.